Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. Working the night shift at a 24-hour grocery can be unnerving as it is, but I'll never forget this one night a few weeks ago that was more terrifying than all my other overnight shifts combined. It started normally, me restocking shelves in the empty store after midnight. There's always an eerie feeling being there alone at night, but it's usually quiet at least. That particular night, though, I couldn't shake a sense of being watched. I shook it off as just being paranoid. Around 2 a.m. towards the back of the store, I first heard it. A faint scuffling sound from the next aisle over, like someone walking. I paused, listening closely. Silence. I peered down the dim aisles, but didn't see anything. Just my mind playing tricks on me, I figured. But then it happened again. The unmistakable sound of footsteps 1 aisle over. Someone was walking slowly, shuffling almost. I called out just in case someone was stuck. No answer, but instead I heard small shuffling. I felt the hair on my neck stand up, realizing I wasn't alone here. The noises continued intermittently, the sound of someone lurking just out of sight 1 row over. I rushed to the front of the store and checked the monitors. It showed only empty aisles, so who was down there with me? I grabbed a box cutter from behind the register, just in case. Then I worked my way cautiously back towards the rear again, listening for the footsteps. As I neared the produce section, I distinctly heard rustling followed by footsteps hurrying away. My voice echoed eerily through the store as I demanded whoever was there show themselves. No reply. Then from 2 aisles over I heard faint, sinister giggling. I was really freaked out now. More muffled laughter came from the prowler in response to my shaky threats. I decided to hide in the office out front until morning, but when I turned the corner, a shadowy figure was at the far end of the aisle before quickly ducking behind the shelves. My heart raced, realizing this was no figment of my imagination. Someone was stalking me in here. I ran to the office and locked the door behind me. I could hear soft footsteps and rustling sounds moving around inside the store. My pulse pounded, imagining him searching the aisles for me, lurking in the darkness. Then I heard a noise right outside the office. The doorknob jiggled as something tried to get in. I crouched trembling in the corner, clutching the box cutter and praying for daylight to come. The jiggling ceased abruptly. I heard the squeak of rubber soles pivoting sharply. Peering around the desk, I saw the doorknob slowly turning again, more forcefully this time. I held my breath, bracing for the worst. After an agonizing few minutes, the sounds outside the office stopped. The store fell silent except for the buzzing lights overhead. I strained to listen for any hint of the stalker's presence, but heard nothing besides my own frenzied breathing. As sunrise approached, I finally unlocked the office door and tentatively peered out. The store appeared empty, unaffected. Had I imagined everything? I searched every aisle looking for evidence of an intruder, but found nothing out of place. Relief washed over me, realizing it must have been my tired mind playing tricks amplified by fear. Chastising myself for overreacting, I resolved not to tell anyone to avoid embarrassment. I finished my shift anxiously awaiting the comforting hustle and bustle of the morning crew's arrival. But over the next week, I couldn't shake a lingering unease. Small sounds at night put me on edge, conjuring imagined specters in the shadows. Unexpectedly running into coworkers made me startle and gasp before realizing who they were. I knew it was just frayed nerves and overactive imagination in the wake of my harrowing graveyard shift. Then I heard another overnight worker had reported eerily similar events from his late shift a few days prior. The phantom footsteps, faint laughter, jiggling doorknob. He was convinced something sinister was stalking the darkened store, toying with us. I reluctantly revealed what I experienced that night. We tried convincing management to stop 24-hour operations, but they dismissed our stories as products of fatigue and paranoia. To placate us, they added additional night staff to keep each other company through the small hours. But then the incidents escalated. Multiple employees reported being followed through the aisles and taunted by disembodied voices. Stuff would be moved overnight from one end of the store to the other, even with 3 to 4 workers present. The feeling of an unseen presence toying with us continued. Eventually, over a dozen overnight workers threatened to quit unless management shut down after midnight. They finally relented after several workers reported this matter and some even handed in their resigning slip. Whether it was an untactical thief, a disturbed trespasser, or a cruel prankster, they couldn't justify endangering staff to stay open all night anymore. I found a new job soon after, grateful to leave that place behind. But I still can't erase the memory of sheer terror from that first night, being hunted through the dark store by an unseen predator. Whoever or whatever it was that tormented us nights seems to have gotten their twisted entertainment. I just hope they'd moved on and no one else ever feels the chilling horror of being their plaything. Working as an overnight security guard at the mall always freaked me out. It was eerily quiet there at night, with just me and a few janitors wandering that massive, empty building after everyone had gone home. I had seen way too many horror movies to feel comfortable being alone in a dark, cavernous place like that once the sun went down. But I needed the job, so I tried to tough it out, even if it meant suffering through some late-night heebie-jeebies. Most shifts, I just paced around, endlessly checking that doors were locked, or sat more at the security desk with my eyes glazing over at the camera feeds. Nothing ever happened. But one night last week, things got weird. It started when I was making my usual rounds, walking the main atrium loop for the 100th time. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a shadowy figure crossing the far concourse. I paused, squinting into the darkness, but saw nothing. Probably just a trick of the light, I told myself. But over the next hour, I caught glimpses of movement on the camera several more times. A dark shape would dart across the frame or duck behind a pillar. It was always too quick to make out any details. I checked each area thoroughly but never found anyone. Yet the shadowy form kept lurking at the edge of the camera views, teasing me. Things got even creepier when I headed down to the maintenance corridors beneath the shops. As I swept my flashlight beam around the dingy concrete hall, I could swear I heard footsteps trailing close behind. Whipping around, I found only empty passageways faintly illuminated by my quivering flashlight. Back at the security office, I nervously scanned the screens. Sure enough, a dark human-shaped blur zipped across the concourse. It seemed to be wandering without purpose, bouncing between floors almost playfully. But how was it avoiding me so easily? I did multiple resweeps, checking every nook and cranny with pounding heart, expecting to confront the shadowy lurker around each corner. But I never found anything. No intruders, no signs of entry, nothing disturbed or stolen. Yet the cameras kept catching brief glimpses of something darting just out of view. Whatever was in there with me remained maddeningly elusive. I'd race to wherever it appeared on screen, only to have it vanish again. My imagination conjured all kinds of supernatural explanations. A ghost, phantom, vampire, or ghoul toying with me. But I told myself surely it must be some trespasser playing a twisted game. Near dawn, while warily roaming the vacant halls once more, I noticed an eerie silence fall. The ever-present background hum of the AC system had gone dead. It was absolutely noiseless, stiller than I'd ever experienced the huge mall before. Like the building itself was holding its breath. A wave of goosebumps washed over me. I knew in that moment the shadowy presence was close, perhaps right behind me, watching my frazzled nerves unravel. I whipped around again and again, brandishing my flashlight in vain at the engulfing darkness. The silence weighed heavier with each step, broken only by my own frantic breathing echoing through the dead air. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being tracked, herded even, forced to confront the thing that had been lurking just out of sight all night. I stood paralyzed in that heavy darkness, staring down the concourse, and though I didn't see or hear anything, I could feel it there, a twisted intelligence watching me from the shadows, drawing out the night's cat and mouse game to savor my fear. Just then the lights flickered back on with a hum. I blinked in the sudden brightness, every hair on end. When my eyes adjusted, the aisles appeared totally empty once again. Feeling utterly unnerved, I retreated to the office to nervously await the sunrise shift change. The next night, I steeled myself to come back, unwilling to let an overactive imagination best me. But things remained quiet and routine. The phantom stalker did not return. My fellow guards doubted my bizarre story, figuring I must have just dozed off and dreamed it all up. But I knew what I experienced in those unnerving midnight hours as I was toyed with through the depths of the lifeless mall. Something ominous lurked there in the shadows, and I feel it's probably still prowling after hours to this day, watching and waiting. In the following weeks, I couldn't get the creepy incident out of my head. I pored over the security footage but found nothing amiss. No shapes darting through the frame, no flickering lights or dead silence. It was like that night never happened. Had it just been a vivid nightmare brought on by one too many late shifts? My logical mind tried reassuring me it was simply exhaustion-induced paranoia. But my gut knew better. Something more sinister had infiltrated the after-hours emptiness of the mall. I started asking around to other guards and janitors, discreetly probing if anyone else had experienced something weird there at night. Most had not, but a few reluctantly admitted to catching glimpses of odd shadows or sounds with no source over the years. We all agreed to keep quiet about it for fear of seeming crazy. But then a new guard named Dan started working the overnight shift. After his very first solo closing, he showed up the next night seeming shaken. He confessed to seeing a dark humanoid shape stalking him on the cameras and hearing phantom footsteps trailing just behind while patrolling. The same eerie game I had endured. I knew then without doubt that a malevolent entity inhabited the mall after dark, toying with any poor soul caught alone there at night. Dan and I pleaded with management again to stop solo shifts, but they just scoffed. We were on our own against this spectral stalker. After a few more weeks of terrifying nights, Dan got up and quit. I lasted a month longer before I reached my breaking point too. The mall remains open 24/7 with oblivious guards earning extra cash by braving shifts alone. But I will never set foot in that place past sunset again. Because I know the thing that lurks in the darkness there is just biding its time before singling out its next nighttime amusement. Driving the night shift as a taxi driver can be unnerving enough by itself, but I'll never forget this one particular night that left me more rattled than any other. It started when I received a pickup request on my dispatcher to an isolated alleyway downtown. One look at the pin drop location was enough to make me immediately decline it. No way was I risking venturing into such a shady, unpopulated area. Over the next hour, I got a few more normal requests that I completed without incident. But then that same dubious alley pickup order popped up on my dispatcher again. I again dismissed it, assuming it was either a prank or mistakenly input address. However, the request persisted, coming through every 10 to 15 minutes or so, no matter how many times I rejected it. At first, I thought my dispatcher was accidentally sending it to me repeatedly, but they insisted it was a new order each time. Someone was deliberately and repeatedly requesting a pickup to this unlit, deserted alley in the dead of night. The irrational part of my brain couldn't help but conjure unsettling reasons why. After 5 or 6 requests, morbid curiosity started to outweigh my caution. Maybe someone was hurt or needed help in that alley. I rationalized. Against my better judgment, I slowly drove to the location, ready to speed off if anything seemed amiss. As I pulled up, the cramped alley was enveloped in inky darkness, barely illuminated by my headlights. No signs of people or movement, just silent blackness. Uneasy, I started rolling up my window to leave. Just then, a metalkin noisily rattled the length of the alley behind me, making me jolt. Peering into the rearview mirror, I could just make out a still dark figure standing at the far end, vaguely backlit by a distant street lamp. My pulse spiked as I slammed the car into gear and raced out of there, thoroughly unnerved. Who was that shadowy form trying to lure drivers there, and for what twisted purpose? Over the rest of my shift, the requests for that location persisted, which I repeatedly ignored. I even considered calling the police just to make them aware, but doubted they could do much without an actual crime taking place. Later at the taxi garage, I cautiously described the experience to my coworkers. They exchanged uneasy glances until one driver named Mike spoke up. He had gotten those same recurring pickup orders a few nights prior, and against his own better judgment, actually went to the alley. But when he arrived, the street was devoid of passengers or people, ominously empty. I felt the chill realizing this had happened to other drivers before me. Someone or something wanted company in that alley very intensely. But was it dangerous or merely desperate? Curiosity kneeled at me again, but was mostly drowned out by fear of becoming the next target. Of course, during my next night's shift, the requests started up again from the anonymous alley beckoner. I did my best to resist, focusing on fares in well-lit, populated areas. But the compulsion to investigate further nagged at me. When a lull hit near sunrise, I reluctantly navigated back to the alley, ready to bolt at the first hint of anything suspicious. Adrenaline flooded my veins as I crept down the passage, peering into gloomy doorways and alcoves. I spoke into the silence, informing the somewhat figure that I won't be taking their requests any longer, while trying to steady my voice. I blinked rapidly at a skittering noise, but it was just a plastic bag blowing across the pavement. As the first rays of sun peeked over the roofs, the grimy alley remained vacant, betrayed only by the stench of overflowing dumpsters. Relief washed over me, realizing this must have been an elaborate prank after all. Still, I couldn't help glancing back over my shoulder as I exited, half expecting that shadowy figure to be lurking behind a doorway leering at me. But the alley remained still and empty in the morning light. Over subsequent night shifts, the bizarre requests eventually ceased. I told myself to forget the odd episode and chalk it up to an overactive mind. But I still catch myself scrutinizing the rearview mirror, half anticipating that spectral passenger to reappear, beckoning me back to the darkness. So far, though, the requests have stayed away and the alley remains silent. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't stop pondering the peculiar incident, no matter how rationally I tried explaining it away. Why me and Mike? Why multiple times over different nights? And who was that phantom caller lingering in the shadows? Curious if anyone else had similar experiences, I discreetly asked other drivers, emphasizing I didn't want to come across as crazy. At first, my questions were met with skepticism and dismissal, but after some prodding, a few drivers hesitantly admitted to getting recurring pickup orders for deserted locations that turned out phantom requests when arriving. One gruff veteran driver named Walt confided he too had a string of orders to the very same alley I investigated. Against his instincts, Walt had gone multiple times but never found a passenger. He was convinced something malevolent had been attempting to lure him there alone. His grave certainty sent a chill down my spine. I stopped bringing it up to avoid sounding paranoid, though an unsettled feeling lingered. Then late one night, while eavesdropping on the dispatcher radio, I overheard a driver frantically say he was in that alley and needed police there immediately before his feet abruptly cut off. My blood ran cold. I waited in dread for an update on the radio, but none ever came. The next evening, I asked the dispatcher if the driver was Ock, though they seemed confused by my question. No incident had been logged the night before. No trace of anything amiss could be found. Something sinister lurked within that alley, beyond rational explanation. After that, I refused all pickups to the location. During late shifts, I still glimpse unexpected movement in my rearview mirror, quick shadows at the corner of my eye. But each time I whip around, the back seat remains empty. At least for now, whatever beckons from that alley has left me in peace. But I know deep down it's likely only a matter of time before the requests start coming for me again late one night. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.